This is the Thypoch Simera 21mm f1.4 for the Leica M mount. It looks to provide near Summilux level quality for about 1/10 of the price, and it honestly might have completely changed my mind about the Leica M11. But is it actually as great a value as it promises, and is it right for you? Let's find out. So you might have seen from one of my recent videos that I switched from the Leica Q3 to the M11 and I was regretting my decision. One reason was because I actually missed the Q3's fixed 28mm Summilux that actually gives you something closer to a 26mm, which felt just wide enough for me as more of a landscape and adventure shooter. And using the 28mm Summicron on the M11 just wasn't quite wide enough for me. But then this lens showed up, the Thypoch 21mm Simera f1.4. After shooting with it for a few weeks, it hasn't just fixed this problem for me, but it has made me view the M11 in a completely different light. As a quick disclaimer, Thypoch did send me this to test out, but as always, I will never hold back on my honest opinions about the gear I use, and this video will be no different, because while I do like this lens, it's by no means perfect, and we're gonna get into some of the quirks and compromises and the things that you should just know about it in a little bit. Okay, so to me, 21mm is basically my ideal wide-angle focal length. I've said this before in previous videos, but my go-to lightweight setup when I'm shooting on a Sony is a 24-50 and the 20mm f1.8. That 20mm G lens has been a staple of my camera bag for years. And when I'm shooting on the Hasselblad X2D, the 25V lens basically lives on that camera, which are also around a 20mm full frame equivalent. I think anything beyond 20mm starts to get a little bit too wide and distorted, and at 20, you're still able to capture really nice foreground elements while still having a ton of depth and context in the mid and background of an image. So for me, I absolutely loved the idea of putting a 21mm on the M11. Now, when you think about fast 21mm lenses for the Leica M world, two lenses usually come to mind. We have the Leica 21mm f1.4 Summilux, which in the US costs around $9,500 new, or like between $5,000 and $6,000 on the used market. And then there's the Voigtlander 21mm f1.4 Nocton, which is significantly cheaper, around $1,050, and definitely respected for its sharpness. The Thypoch Simera 21mm f1.4 comes in at $999. So that's roughly 1/10 the price of the Leica Summilux and still cheaper than the Voigtlander. But there are plenty of budget M lenses out there. Just because it's a budget and has like good stats on the top level doesn't mean it's actually any good. Like this 35mm f1.4 from 7 Artisans, this thing is terrible. I hate this lens so much. But the Thypoch 21, let's talk about it. So let's start on the physical side of things. The Simera 21mm f1.4 has the same design language of other Thypoch lenses. All metal construction, nice clean engraving, a nice lens hood with a secondary lens hood cap as well, and sort of the Thypoch signature red dot distance scale thing, like these indicators here on the top, which isn't really my favorite from a design perspective, but from a practical perspective, it is really nice for zone focusing. The focusing ring is smoothly dampened. It's nice and precise and, stiff enough that you're not gonna accidentally bump it as you're, just walking around and things like that. The aperture ring has both a clicked and declicked option, which is great if you wanna adapt this to a SL camera or any of your other mirrorless cameras for video. I actually think the M mount is gonna start being a more universal standard for photo lenses in the same way that PL mount is for cinema lenses, since it's so easily adapted to so many different systems. This lens has a 62mm front thread, which is a little bit larger than most of your standard Leica lenses, but it is kind of to be expected for a 21mm f1.4. Now, we should talk about the size. This is not a small Leica lens, coming in at 429 grams. If you're used to, tiny Leica lenses that kind of feel weightless when strung around your shoulder and things like that, this is certainly not one of those lenses. Like, it definitely makes the camera a little bit more front heavy, and it's, substantially worse than something like this 28 Summicron when you're just hanging it around your shoulder. Now, that's sort of just physics, right? Like, you can't have a 21mm f1.4, 14 blades of aperture. There's gonna be some glass that is needed to kind of back that up. And when you compare it to the other 21mm f1.4s out there, it is actually quite a bit smaller. So this one is, as I mentioned, 429 grams, whereas the Voigtlander is 480, and then the Leica Summilux is 580. Now, by mirrorless standards, this lens is small. So like, here's that 21mm f1.8 Sony lens we were talking about. By comparison, like, it is certainly a bit smaller, and this is one of the smallest mirrorless 20mm primes that's out there. I know that's like it's a pretty specific thing, but this is a small lens, and this Thypoch one is smaller. But if size of your kit is the biggest requirement, then maybe this isn't it for you. Like, there's probably just no f1.4 that's gonna do it for you. Real quick, we gotta talk about motion VFX. So if you've watched any of my videos in the past and seen the motion graphics and animated text, that is all thanks to motion VFX. It's a simple but super powerful and customizable set of plugins for your video editor that allows you to create high quality graphics without needing to know advanced After Effects or anything like that. One thing I've really been liking lately is the M-Titles Cinematic. I've been using these in a lot of my short form videos to add some pizzazz to my anamorphic footage and make it feel even more like you're in a movie. You just drag it onto your timeline, and then you can customize all of your settings and parameters to your liking. They group them all into these packs based on theme, and there are loads to choose from. Plus they work with DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut, Premiere, After Effects, you name it. So it's a really easy way to add some extra flair regardless of what editor you use. So pop over to motionvfx.com at the link in the description, and a huge thank you as always to Motion VFX for sponsoring today's video. And by the way, this little graphic here, also for Motion VFX. That said, Thypoch does have a very unique feature, and that is close focus. So the minimum focus is 0.23 meters, or about 9 inches. And yes, on a Leica M body, you can only rangefinder focus up to 0.7 meters, but if you flip to live view or using an external viewfinder, you can take full advantage of it. And there's this little bump in the focusing ring that kind of gives you a tactile feel to say like, hey, you've gone past the rangefinder coupling. On the one hand, I do wish that that bump was a little bit more defined, so you don't actually go past it on an M camera, but if you were adapting this to anything else, I think you might want a little bit less. So I think this is probably a pretty good middle ground. Now, close focus on a wide lens with a fast aperture opens up some really unique creative opportunities. Like being able to focus on a close-up subject but still get tons of context in the background is super unique. And as someone who's doing landscapes often, this is something that I was really missing when I switched to the Leica M11. Leica has been adding close focus to a lot of their more recent lens releases, but I think I actually find it more useful on a wide angle because you're still able to include so much more in your frame. Like on the 50mm close focus, like what good is that other than just like, you know, taking pictures of flowers? Like in this one, you can take pictures of flowers and still get a bunch of stuff behind it. Plus you're gonna have to shell out some serious money to get your hands on any type of close focusing native Leica lens. But I don't think that this is limited to just landscape photography either. Maybe you want to do some environmental portraits where your subject is filling the frame, but you're, kind of still have a little bit of background room to breathe as well. Maybe you want to do kind of some layered street photography, things like that. Just getting up close to a subject on a wide angle lens is something that I really, really enjoy. Okay, let's talk image quality. I would say wide open at f1.4, the Simera 21mm is very good at the center. You know me, I think lens charts are boring, but they do help to quickly diagnose a lens. So at f1.4, we see again, sharp in the center with some sharpness roll off in the corners, which, kind of to be expected for a cheaper lens. There is also a heavy amount of vignetting wide open, like a couple of stops actually. But honestly, a lot of M lenses do suffer from this, especially the wider angles. Like I do think the vignetting on this one is a little bit more pleasing than on my 28 Summicron. And then it does start to clean up quite a bit as we stop down. So you can see as we stop down to f2, we see how much it reduces. And then as we stop down in the corners, that vignetting starts to disappear over time as well. I'm also not really seeing too much chromatic aberration either. Like it's not perfect by any means, but definitely controlled enough for me to feel comfortable shooting into more like higher contrast areas. If we have some leaves kind of in the corner, I think that'd be fine. From a sharpness perspective, I would say that it is plenty sharp for my liking. Again, it's not perfect on the edges wide open, but once we get to like 2.8 and beyond, it honestly is really solid and definitely sharp enough to resolve the 60 megapixel sensor of the M11. Sunstars and bokeh are really nice thanks to that 14 bladed aperture, and it seems to handle flaring pretty nicely as well. We also see a little bit of pincushion distortion on the edges, which like some level of distortion is very much to be expected on a wide angle lens. So I'm actually impressed on how minimal it is, but my personal preference is to have barrel distortion over pincushion distortion. This of course can be corrected in post, but there's currently no dedicated lens profiles for Thypoch lenses in Lightroom at the time of recording this. So you'll either need to manually adjust distortion and vignetting, or just be okay using something that's in there and just having that be close enough. I will also say that having that f1.4 maximum aperture opens up a whole new world of possibilities for the M system. With the M11 lacking image stabilization, having an extra wide aperture on such a wide lens means that this thing becomes quite a low light beast and can drop down your shutter speed pretty considerably and still feel confident you're going to get a sharp image. And I also, again, really like how pleasing the bokeh and out of focus areas are on this lens. But like I said off the top, this lens is by no means perfect. We've kind of talked about that a little bit, but let me talk about some of the other qualms that I have. First and foremost, there is no focusing tab. Now, I know that this is very much a personal preference and some folks might consider this a positive, but I'm pretty sure they didn't include one because they're trying to position this as an option for those who do adapt this lens to other cameras and do use it for video. So I guess in that sense, it does make a little bit more sense, but for me, I do really wish that there was one. For most lenses that lack a focusing tab, they have pretty chunky nubs, and that's what we see on the Voigtlander 21mm, for example. But the Thypoch needs to make room for their characteristic distance scale dots, so that means that the knobs are actually quite small and then also very close to the lens mount. By no means do I have large fingers, but there have been plenty of times where my middle or index finger kind of ends up blocking the rangefinder as a result. This is much more of an issue when shooting, vertically versus horizontally. So my solution has been that I grabbed a focusing tab from 7 Artisan that you can apply onto the lens. These are normally only a couple bucks on Amazon, but I used to be able to find them much easier. When I was looking most recently, the shipping times were like months out, or there were just much more expensive options on eBay. If you guys have any leads on where we can get one of these a little bit quicker, let me know in the comments, and everybody else will benefit as a result. And while you're down there, did you know that a lot of you aren't subscribed, and you probably think you are? So while you're down there, just go ahead and check, make sure you're subscribed. Another build related qualm I have is the aperture ring. While it's nice that it is declickable, when the clicks are enabled, those clicks distances between each of the stops is not consistent. So from f1.4 to f4, there's 3 clicks between each full stop, but then from 4 to 5, it's only 2, and then 5.6 to 8 is 1 click, to 11 is 1 click, and then to 16 is 1 click. Is that a deal breaker? No, but if you're just trying to kind of adjust your aperture by feel, that's gonna be a little bit annoying. The next one might be a little bit obvious, but composing on a 21mm lens on the M11 can be a bit challenging because the optical viewfinder only shows frames up to 28mm. This means that you either need to use live view or some just guesswork, or you add an external viewfinder. To this point, I've just been relying on live view and sort of just kind of estimating through the viewfinder. And in general, I feel like I'm getting quite better at that estimation, but I am very much considering getting a VisiFlex 2, which ironically is about the same price as this lens. But of course, this is a 21mm issue, not a this lens only issue. So just wanted to make that clear in case you weren't aware for some reason that 21mm has its own kind of qualms. When we really start to consider the value side of the equation, I think that's what makes the Thypoch a winner. The Leica Summilux 21mm f1.4, it's a beast, but it's also almost 10 grand. That's pretty much outside the realm of normal purchase for most people. The Voigtlander, super well regarded, but it's even bigger and it doesn't have that same close focusing, which again, I don't think close focusing is important for like a 50mm or a 35, in my opinion, but I do see it being a lot more useful for a wide angle 21. For the money, I think this is an insane value for the M system, and I absolutely am going to have this as a permanent home in my kit. It has helped me to actually fall in love with the M11 even more, so I am definitely hyped to, have a little bit less regret about letting go of my Q3. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.